of the reasons I decided to hunt grizzly is it's exciting. A lot of times you sit for days and hours, and all of a sudden, I mean, it happens in seconds.
Boone and Crockett Country, presented by Loophole.
There was a time in the earliest days of Western expansion across North America that fur, not gold, fueled discovery. Long before James Marshall found gold at Sutter's Mill in California in 1848, the commodity of free enterprise and fortune was the fur of certain mammals. The trade in the fur from sea otter, fox, mink, and marten was one of the earliest and most important industries in North America for more than 300 years. The mainstay, though, was beaver. Beaver was used to make felt hats in Europe, and therefore a fashion necessity in the New World. Between 1570 and 1870, hundreds of thousands of beaver per year were trapped by French, British, and native Indian trappers, skinned and transported out of the wilderness by whatever means was available. Their destination, the nearest trading post. Many of today's urban centers in the United States and Canada were at first trading posts or forts established because of the trade in fur. Something else of great importance, especially to sportsmen, resulted from the penetration into the wilderness by fur trappers: news of big game. One fur trade outpost of historical significance to big game hunters is Telegraph Creek, the oldest community in northwestern British Columbia. Telegraph Creek is located inland from the northern west coast of British Columbia, at the confluence of the Stikine River and Telegraph Creek. Russian fur traders in the 1790s were the first Europeans to see and identify the Stikine's estuary. In the mid-1800s, fur traders were joined by gold prospectors who followed the Stikine toward the interior in the hope of sudden wealth. This first gold rush came to nothing. Near the end of the 1800s, the fur trading giant Hudson's Bay Company set up its first permanent Stikine trading post 12 miles below Telegraph Creek. At about the same time, gold was discovered to the north at the mouth of the Klondike River. Telegraph Creek then witnessed the flood of Klondike stampeders headed for the gold fields of the Yukon. Throughout its history, the prosperity of Telegraph Creek ebbed and flowed with the fur trade, the gold rush, the activity surrounding the stringing of the transatlantic telegraph route in 1866, which is how it got its name, and in 1940 as a supply depot for the construction of the Alaskan Highway. As Mark Werner explains, fur and news of gold weren't the only things flowing out of this region of British Columbia.
As the trappers and the prospectors combed the Telegraph Creek country, word spread out of all the magnificent and densely populated animal populations in the Telegraph Creek area, and this word spread out worldwide.
With fur and gold fever diminished and the advent of wireless communication replacing the telegraph in 1936, leaving men without work, a new industry bubbled out of the ground at Telegraph Creek: big game hunting. With it, a new man with the mettle and acumen to apply his knowledge of the trail and wildlife sprang forth to bring clientele to game and then back out again. The guide outfitter of British Columbia was born. Some century and a half later, modern-day bow hunter Tom Hoffman traveled to this still famed region in pursuit of one of its most celebrated and notorious residents, the grizzly.
Boone and Crockett Country is in partnership with the Wild Sheep Foundation, putting and keeping sheep on the mountain, and the Dallas Safari Club, promoting conservation and ethical hunting worldwide.
In the early 1800s, travel overland by pack trail was the only way to access Telegraph Creek. With the fur trade, the discovery of gold, and telegraph line workers needing supplies, paddle wheelers from Wrangell, Alaska on the coast, traveling 165 miles up the Stikine River, began reaching Telegraph Creek, bringing people and goods in and furs out. The fur trade in North America began to decline in the mid-1800s, when both fur-bearing mammals became scarce from over-trapping and the fashion favorite in hats shifted from beaver to silk. By 1870, beaver fever was over. Today, Telegraph Creek is a shadow of its former self, but is still the jump-off point for sportsmen seeking adventure in some of the most spectacular, unspoiled, and game-rich country left in North America. Long gone are the paddle wheelers and pack strings to just get you there. Now, one can grind it out on a steep switchback mountain road or drop in by float plane. From there, it's either another float or bush plane to camp, or travel by horse and mule.
One of the attractions to British Columbia is the diversity of species. Many of the 29 North American species are found in British Columbia, such as stone sheep, mountain goat, caribou, grizzly, black bear, mule deer, whitetail, and wolf.
While many of these species can be hunted in combination, Tom Hoffman was singularly focused on taking a grizzly with a bow and using a natural bear call, splashing fish.
One of the reasons I decided to hunt grizzly is it's exciting. And hunting bears on salmon is a real advantage when you've got them located at a food source. And then the location we were at, there was a lot of salmon. They were splashing all around us. It was pretty exciting just watching salmon.
Hoffman's choice for this campaign was Greg Williams and his outfit, Golden Bear Outfitting.
In British Columbia today, there's over 300 guide concessions. Our area, the Golden Bear area, is one of the oldest guide concessions in British Columbia. It's one of the larger areas, over 8,000 square miles of some of the most pristine wilderness left in the world today. Evidence indicates that the outfitting industry possibly began in this region as early as 1874, when a Hudson Bay factor by the name of J.F. Culbreth started taking hunting clients and using local natives, the Tahltan First Nations, as guides. Where we're located, there's plentiful salmon. So with that, there's a large population of grizzlies. With this setup, being able to find where the bears are fishing these salmon, we're able to set up over some of these key fishing holes for the bears, and it just provides a real excellent opportunity for bow hunters and rifle hunters alike.
The attraction for Hoffman to Williams and his guide area was salmon. In BC and elsewhere, where there is salmon, there will be bear. If you're a bow hunter planning on stalking the wilderness in hopes of a glimpse of a grizzly, let alone an encounter within bow range with a mature male, salmon can be the great leveler. Based on this fact, Hoffman chose a fall hunt with salmon versus a spring hunt without this natural food supply. Of the 5 species of Pacific salmon, sockeye are the only ones that spawn in lakes, not rivers. They do use rivers and streams to access the outlets of mountain lakes, but all spawning is done within the appropriate sized gravel beds of secluded lakeshore coves. Here, the scent of dead, spawned out salmon and the splashing of those in the process ring the dinner bell for bears each fall. For the hunter, setting up on these spawning areas is the best bet for stacking the odds in your favor of seeing a grizzly up close. And up close is what Hoffman needed. glassing for bear, assessing the progress of the salmon spawn, and scouting for sign the bear were indeed beginning to descend to the lake shore to fish, filled the first few days of the hunt. Once it was determined it was time to commit to a stand location, a stand was hung overlooking an active area.
We finally found the perfect spot. It was awesome. There was salmon all around us, splashing and chasing each other. It was exciting just watching the fish, which keeps you entertained, especially if you're going to sit in a tree for a long time. It's nice to have some entertainment, either birds or fish or other animals. It was a really exciting spot, and we all felt it was the perfect spot.
The hunt at this point became a waiting game.
Boone and Crockett Country is in partnership with Buck Knives, knives that fit your life, and the Pope and Young Club, for the good of bow hunting.
Names like Bella Coola, Anaheim Plateau, Dease Lake, Spatsizi Plateau, Chilcotin, Cassiaus, East Kootenai, and Telegraph Creek are names of great significance to sportsmen. To the guide outfitting fraternity of BC and big game hunters worldwide, names like Clayton Mack, Lynn Ross, Leo Rutledge, Red Sorensen, George Ball, Jimmy White, Lester Dorsey, Art Nickel, Dix Anderson, F.C. Galbraith, Albert Cooper, Stan and Linda Lancaster, Pete Lund, Bert Peterson, Walter Nixon, Bernie McKay, Frank Golada, Don Peck, and many others mean one thing: pioneers. Outfitting in the early days in British Columbia was a very loosely built affair. There were no fancy lodges, sportsman shows, or deposits laid down.
The hunters that showed up at Telegraph Creek in those days, they'd show up on the riverbanks looking to find some of the pack string of horses and camps. The outfitters of those days were usually leftovers from the gold rush, trappers, prospectors, that then turned into outfitters. And many of them were tribal Indians in the Tahltan Indian bands and First Nations that had the experience, that knew the country, that could take the sportsmen into the back country.
Hoffman's hunt was more typical by today's standards. Contacts were made, deposit placed, dates discussed, and plans laid. Access to the hunting area was by float plane and camp, a Spartan but comfortable one-on-one tent and tarp affair with Golden Bear guide Blake Williams pulling guide, cook, and camp wrangler duties. Big game hunting and outfitting in British Columbia has evolved over the years out of necessity. In the early 1900s, there were game laws, but according to the writings of A. Bryan Williams, British Columbia's chief game warden, who took his post in 1905, even at the time of my arrival in this country, there were some sort of game laws, but they were a dead letter. No one paid the slightest attention to them. The BC wilderness in the 1800s had only one law, the law of survival. The wildlife science we have today did not exist, and an abundance of wildlife and the need for meat and fish meant an unlimited take for both the white man and native Indians. Like elsewhere across the continent, even in the vastness of British Columbia, the weight of unregulated harvest took its toll. Bag limit restrictions began to reach the outfitting industry by 1900. One early outfitting assignment read, 2 stone, 1 fanon, 3 goat, 3 caribou, 2 moose, bear and wolf, no limit. Bear, grizzly in particular, were looked upon at the time by those living with them as nothing more than a parasite, just one of those things placed on earth to make things difficult for people. Much of the west coast of British Columbia was salmon dependent, which lowered further still the position of bears. Bear ate salmon, therefore bears shortchanged canneries, and therefore bears equaled bad. Grizzly, it seems, were in no short supply. As one pioneering outfitter recalled, "Grizzly? Oh yes, there's lots of grizzly bears, all right, and some short-fused ones, too. Nobody got killed in my camps, but there were lots of standoffs."
We had a little bit of a problem on this hunt. There was a lot of bears in the berries way up on top, and we couldn't get at them. There was a monumental amount of brush from between the lake and where the bears were. So Blake, you think they're eating berries up there?
Yeah, probably berries and grass.
Yeah.
Maybe chasing the odd ground squirrel.
Well, the salmon are just starting to die here on the lake, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, probably. What do they prefer, berries, or is it like us, we want a little variety?
Yeah, I think later in the fall, once the fish start dying, they come down to the lake and really tank up before they hit the den.
Probably be a lot easier ambushing them on the lake, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it'd be ideal sort of thing.
We decided to put the tree stand up around all these feeding salmon.
The wind is really good today. It's a little wind checker.
A lot of times you sit for days and hours, and all of a sudden, I mean, it happens in seconds. And my buddy Tyler's in the tree right next to me. He whispers over, and he says, "Tom, here comes a bear." I kind of like it when you get an opportunity to see a bear coming for a longer period of time, but this happened really quick, as it often does. I mean, you know, in whitetail hunting or any kind of hunting, it happens so quick. There's your opportunity, you take the shot, and it's over. But it was very, very exciting.
A lot of blood here. He's laying right there. You can see him right there.
We did it, buddy. Pretty hide. Oh, what a pretty bear. Whew. Big hump on him. Oh, he's beautiful. Beautiful bear. He got a great big fat head. Beautiful bear. Beautiful. Great hide too. It is just a perfect bear. I don't know if you can see his claws or not here, but he's got some serious big claws. He's a typical beautiful grizzly. Just exactly what I was after. He is a beauty. Thank you, Blake. Good job guiding. You're a heck of a cook, too.
Boone and Crockett Country has been brought to you by Leupold, America's Optics Authority, and the Boone and Crockett Club, fair chase and conservation since 1887.
The pioneering outfitters of British Columbia are long gone, but not forgotten. The remains of their businesses in old cabins and trails live on, as do the meadows, mountains, passes, creeks, streams, crossings, and camps that still bear their names. The legacy of these great men lives on today through the Guide Outfitter Association of British Columbia. GOABC has become a guild of some stature, and its industry a valuable component of the province's tourist trade, as well as the provident management of its wildlife resources.
The GOABC, founded in 1966, is a close brotherhood of outfitters that come from generations of family members that pioneered the outfitting industry. The role of our members is stewardships of our territories and our land, and are really the advocates for wildlife stewardship in a society that is environmentalists and preservationists, not understanding that the wise use of the resource is actually what preserves the resource.
This is our challenge everywhere. Even in some of the most remote wildernesses in North America, where hunting and fishing have been a way of life for centuries, a disconnect exists among some people, guided by a philosophical view that wildlife would be better off left to fend for itself, without its use by man. Thankfully, there are groups like GOABC and other guide outfitter associations, conservation organizations, historical records, and modern wildlife science exposing the flaws of this preservationist philosophy.
Closed captioning provided by the Dallas Safari Club, promoting conservation and ethical hunting worldwide.